If you go and check in your history, recent history books, there was no destabilization of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Americans had stayed very far from the Democratic Republic of Congo because when he was head of state and president, President Zuma sent the ground forces with an air base that was backing up the military forces on the ground. And the rebels knew that against the air power of South Africa, they can cause instability in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why did he do that? Because he wanted the Democratic Republic of Congo to prosper. Not because he wanted deals for himself. But this one who is in office now, when they took power, the first thing they did was to dismantle the air base of South Africa and the DRC. That is why those rebels could go and attack the ground forces and killed 14 of South Africa's soldiers because they knew that there is no air capacity to back up the soldiers on the ground. President Zuma understood very well what had to be done for the African continent. He was at the forefront of stabilization of Burundi after years of civil conflicts. The people of Burundi to this day respect President Zuma for bringing stability. He was the midwife of the peace process in Burundi. He played a central role in the self-determination of South Sudan and gave practical support to South Sudan to say, let us have a people that can determine their own territory. Look what happened now. Because South Africa has pulled out of the DRC, the Americans have moved in. And there is no intervention that Africa makes that is not about self-interest, that is not about exploitation of our natural resources. In that White House discussion of the colonial clerks and Trump, they were even no thank you very much for helping us in the DRC. What is America doing in the DRC? Why is a head of state of South Africa allowing for the neo-colonial control of the DRC by Americans? Don't we have enough resources and capacity to bring stability to the DRC? Comrades, despite all these factual and tell no lies observations that we are making about the African continent, there is, however, beginning to be a glimmer of hope. There is a glimmer of hope that is coming from West Africa. The countries of Niger, of Mali, and Burkina Faso are a glimmer of hope in the African continent. That is why we as Umkhonto season, we have taken a strategic resolution that number one in the nation states and countries that we're going to call our friends, our strategic international friends, must include Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And we're going to play a central role in encouraging many other African countries to associate with the anti-colonial governments of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. There is good development now that Chad is joining into the association of the Sahel region states. We will encourage all the other African countries to take the anti-colonial posture that defines Burkina Faso. And comrades, we must never fold our arms when the imperialist West intimidates our leaders. During the struggle against colonialism, they eliminated a lot of our revolutionary leaders. They killed Patrice Lumumba. They removed Kwame Nkrumah from power. They deposed Sakotoro from power. Haile Selassie mysteriously disappeared. And we can see now that they want to pose a threat on the life of our brother, Captain Ibrahim Traore. We should send a strong warning as Africans that no one is going to touch Captain Ibrahim Traore. Captain Traore is as he represents the values of Mkonto Wesizwe. And all other African countries must take the route that Burkina Faso is taking. We hope that there must be success in the revolutionary overthrow of the government of Ivory Coast under Ouattara. Because Ouattara is nothing but a colonial stooge. We need to liberate our countries from no-colonialism and then pursue proper integration. It doesn't make sense that Africa is having the most arable land in the entire African continent, in the entire world, I mean to say. But Africa still continues to be the net importer of food when we can produce our own food. More than 60% of the African continent still does not have electricity, despite the fact that we are home of energy minerals that can electrify us for eternity. We are home of mega rivers that can generate hydroelectricity. The reason why we are trapped in that vicious cycle of poverty and underdevelopment is these leaders with tiny visions and tiny thoughts and tiny courage who go to America and say our economies are tiny. We need to pursue a revolutionary agenda that will bring about true freedom. And comrades, we must appreciate lastly that all of this we will do with our friends in the whole world. There are countries in the world that are the friends of the African continent, and they've been so for many years. Russia is our friend as the African continent, and there's no doubt about that. In the anti-colonial struggles, in the struggles for independence, Russia provided not just moral support, material support to fight against colonialism. They trained our soldiers. They gave guns to fight back against colonial invaders. Comrades, despite the misgivings of some Chinese companies that exploit some of our people elsewhere, but the People's Republic of China is our friend. You know, between Zambia and Tanzania, there's a rail project which was built in the 1970s called the Tanzania-Zambia Railway Authority, TAZARA, which was built as a donation by the People's Republic of China, more than 1,600 kilometers. When Zambia was free, under Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, there was no other route to access the ocean except through a liberated coast of Tanzania, which was led by Julius Nyerere. Because when Zambia had gained its freedom, Rhodesia was still under the government of Ian Smith. South Africa was still under apartheid. And the Chinese government, out of its own willingness, built a rail project for goods and services for people from Zambia to Tanzania. It's still operating to this day. The rail project from Addis Ababa today to the coast of Djibouti was built with the assistance of the Chinese. A lot of strategic infrastructure in the continent are being built with the assistance of the People's Republic of China. So China is our friend. Brazil is our friend. India is our friend. That is why, through his visionary leadership, President Zuma was the one who went to join a group of countries that was called BRIC and became BRICS by the addition of South Africa. He understood long time ago that these Western nations of America and the erstwhile colonizers will never have our interest. They will always try to bully us, mischaracterize us, treat all of us like kids who cannot think for themselves. That is why the entire African continent must develop a mutually beneficial relationship with our friends. We must develop economically and strategically beneficial relationships with our friends. We should build infrastructure in the African continent that will make it easier to trade from within the African continent and amongst ourselves. It doesn't make sense that we still don't have a rail project that must interconnect the entire African continent. Despite a commitment of Agenda 2063 that we must start with an interconnected rail project. Why is it important? To transport goods and products, you need proper transport infrastructure. What happens now is that outside of China, the biggest trading partners of each African country, it's its former colonizers. It's imperialist forces that have got interest over our mineral resources. We produce platinum group metals here in South Africa. But where do they go? To London. We produce gold here in South Africa. Where does it go? To London. All the strategic resources that we have are being controlled from elsewhere. There were countries, comrades, in the 1940s. There were countries in 1962 when the OAU was formed, which were poorer than all African countries. But currently they are 20 times richer than many African, if not all African countries. South Korea was not always an advanced economy. China was not always an advanced economy. The countries in the inroads were not always the richest, but now they are treated with respect all over the world. But ourselves, all the 54 nations of the African continent, plus 14 in the Caribbean, are still underdeveloped. We must think as to why is it that everyone, all people of African ancestry are organized and are under countries that do not enjoy any respect or any prosperity. Even as groups of people. If you go and pull out all Africans or people, black people of African ancestry in the United States of America, you take them out like this and gauge them, you'll realize that they've got the same levels of illiteracy and poverty like all of us here in the African continent. People of African ancestry in America are a small minority, but they constitute the biggest prison population. If you go to Brazil, which has got the second largest black population in the world after Nigeria, you take all those black people and engage them, their socio-economic conditions, they still stay in squalor and suffering. And when Mkhonto says that for us to change the conditions of black people in South Africa, in the African continent, in the African diaspora, one of the things that we need is unity. Someone says, no, we don't want unity. The only way we can win these battles is to appreciate that we have to unify ourselves. And this requires us to have sound organization so that we can appeal to our people. Comrades, I said that I'm going to stick to revolutionary discipline and speak about the topic of today. I have done so. Thank you very much. If I have done so, well, thank you very much, comrades. Let's continue to repeat the clarion call that was mentioned in the last sentence of December 16, 1961, when Umkhonto Sizwe, the Liberation Army, was founded and announced. And that clarion call was Africa, Mayibuye, Mayibuye, yeah, Africa.
This is News Live SA.